Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
If we could now give a warm welcome for our main speaker, who is Johnny.
Hello, my name is Johnny Segal. I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. I want to thank Sally for talking. She's an old friend, and happy birthday. I opted not to wear the headband. I also want to wish happy birthday to everyone that took cakes. A lot of old friends took cakes tonight for me, and it helps ground me. I really. I'm having one of those nights where I need a meeting, so I'm glad here, even though I have to listen to me. I also want to wish a nice welcome to the new people. If you're scared and paranoid and this seems very strange and weird, then that's really good, because that's how the rest of us felt when we first got here. There's always like one or two people that felt like really happy to be here, but I generally don't end up knowing them very well. Let's see. I'm gonna talk about what it's like now, what happened, and what it was like, sort of in that order. What it's like now. Let's see. Other than relationships and finances and work. Everything's going okay. I have this sponsor named Howard Polens. He's spoken here a number of times. He's just this wonderful, angelic, sort of gnome of a person who sounds like Elmer Fudd. And I remember Howard telling me once about Murphy's Law, that Murphy's Law was anything that could go wrong, will go wrong. And he told me that Murphy's Law works if you work it. And I've been doing my best lately. He also told me one time when I was sober for, I don't know, 5 years or so, I went through a really bad patch, and I was really shocked because, I had 5 years. I'd worked the steps. I'd done all the stuff. And nothing was working out the way I wanted it to. And I called Howard complaining about that fact and rather upset about it, because I felt, like somehow I had failed something. And he said, Johnny, he said, actually he said like Elmer Fudd, he said, Johnny? he said, Jesus Christ, whether you believe Jesus Christ was the Son of God, or just a very, spiritual, highly evolved individual. He said, Jesus Christ had 2 of the worst last weeks of anyone I've ever heard of. And for some reason, that's always cheered me up. No matter how I feel. On the drive up here, or down here, up here, I was remembering some stuff, something that occurred to me when I was going through Studio 12. I went through this halfway house back in 1981, and this guy, this old-timer, sort of half not there, you know, just a little bit on the burnt side. You know, there's always like one of those guys around who's like really nice and really has a kind heart, but basically drank away about 3/4 of his brain. And there was one of those guys at this meeting I was at, and he would make these things. He would make these keys, and he would give them out to newcomers. And he gave me one, and it said on it, turn it over. And I turned it over, and it said surrender. And it was the first time I'd heard the term surrender, and it was not one that I was familiar with, having been a fighter all my life, which is why I was in Studio 12 Recovery House. And it perplexed me, because the meeting I'd been to that night, everyone talked about letting go and surrender, and this was just a concept that seemed ridiculous. It seemed like losing. You know, I didn't come here to lose. You know, I came here to, well, I don't know why I came here, but I came here. And that night I laid in bed in this room with my roommates. It was actually my honeymoon. Literally my honeymoon. I had just gotten married, and I was spending my honeymoon with 10 guys in this halfway house, and it was very romantic. And I was thinking about this surrender stuff, and I remembered that about a month before, well, maybe it was a couple weeks before, my mother had just died, and I had run off after the funeral to Costa Rica. Someone had once said to me, if you're ever in the neighborhood, look me up, kind of thing. And so I decided to get into the neighborhood and went down there to hang out in the jungle and drink rum and coke and forget about my life once again. And at one point I was sitting on the porch with this guy who had this house, this teak house, in the middle of the jungle, in the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. It was you know, banana trees and jungle bananas all over the place, and monkeys jumping around, and sloths and giant iguanas that sounded like dinosaurs in the leaves, and it was a fantastic place. And we were sitting on his porch drinking rum and cokes, and at one point I looked down, and at the bottom of this view was this bay, this gorgeous bay. And I said to the guy, I said, what's that dark area in the bay? And he said, ah, God, that's so sad. I said, what do you mean it's sad? And he said, Johnny, the truth is about 4 people a year drown there, and it's completely unnecessary. And I said, well, what do you mean it's unnecessary? It sounded like a strange description of drowning. And drowning always seemed necessary to me. And he said that what it was he says, Johnny, from up here you can see that it's a dark area. And what it is those are the riptides. And what happens is people go out swimming there, and if the weather's been particularly difficult, the water all of a sudden grabs them like a vice and starts to suck them down and pull them out, and suck them down and pull them out. And they panic. They panic with this force, and they begin to swim towards shore, and they swim and they swim and they swim, and the water sucks them down and pulls them out, and they swim and swim until eventually, unless they're great swimmers, eventually their muscles turn to rubber from exhaustion, and they fill up with water and drown. And he says, and it's completely unnecessary. And I said, why do you keep saying it's unnecessary? You know? And he said, Johnny, he says, from up here you can see it's just a dark area. And the truth is if these people, instead of fighting this riptide, would just relax and let go and allow the water to suck them down, it would also pull them out. And it would ultimately pull them out beyond the dark area. Sure, they'd get a little water up the nose, they'd get frightened, they'd get scared, but it would pull them beyond that dark area that we're looking at, and the water would get calm again. And all they'd have to do is swim parallel to the shoreline for a bit and then swim in. And I thought about that story in that recovery house, and it was like I got it. It was the first time I got it. It's the first time I got anything since I'd come here. And I think I cried for the first time in many, many years, because I was not much, I'm from New Jersey. And strangely enough, the next morning, I went downstairs and decided to read something. And at this point, I couldn't really read very well because I was still hallucinating. And the words were just bouncing off the paper. So I found the smallest book with the biggest print. And it was this book called Illusions. And I picked it up and started reading. And it was about this guy who was a mechanic who started praying, and all these answers came to him. And he told all these people this story about these sea creatures who lived in the current, holding onto rocks. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this is very familiar. This is the same story that I was going through in my mind last night. And these creatures would hold onto the rocks, and it was about this one that wanted to have faith that if he let go of the rock, that the current knew which way it was going, and that he didn't want to live tied to this rock his whole life. And I remember thinking a lot about that over the next several years, and holding on to that idea and using that as sort of the basis for my sobriety. I, however, picked up the book yesterday for the first time since then. I guess that was 15 years ago. I'm 14 years sober now. And I started reading, I started reading someone else, that story. And I didn't realize that there was a second part to the story, because I was only able to grasp the first part of the story about these little sea creatures and letting go of the rock, because that's where I was. But the story went on to talk about how this guy went out and started preaching this story and started working with all these other people and working with God and helping all these other people and spending his time and his life, and people would come to him from all over, and he would constantly be giving them all these things. And it was about this guy's journey until he basically exploded inside and was forced to go off by himself up into these mountains and talk to God again. And God gave him some more information, and he came back, and people wanted to know, could he help them? And he said, if God told you to be willing to suffer, to be willing to go through anything, to be willing to feel any ultimate pain, would you be willing to do this? And they all sort of went, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, we'd do that. And he said, on the other hand, if God told you to be happy, just to be happy, to be joyful, to be enthusiastic, would you be willing to do that? And they were silent. And he said, well, that's what I'm going to do. And he left and went back to being a mechanic. What occurred to me on the way over here tonight was that I sort of got the first part of that story okay. When I first got sober, I had worked enough and made enough money and had my home that I was able to let go of everything in my life and simply work Alcoholics Anonymous and work with others and do it for no money. And it was this joy that I got at first and this rush that I got. And what happened was, slowly but surely, I began to realize that I forgot what it was that I did. And I forgot to do my own work. And I did this. When I was sober for 6 months, I co-founded one of the other 12-step programs and got involved with that as a trustee and got involved full-time doing this. And I loved it. And it was a rush. But I forgot about my own joy and about my own life, and did it in the name of sacrificing, and did it in the name of a higher good. But what started out as a good idea became something I did as a result of being afraid of my own life, and being afraid to do my work, and to do my life, and to be creative, and to dig a little deeper, and to take some chances. And over the last couple of years, I found that every time I started to go back to that, if things didn't go well right off the bat, I would balk and put a backpack on and go off traveling around the world. Now, I have to admit, if you got to fuck up, that's a nice way to do it. And it's been, the last few years have been really interesting and really exciting. I mean, I've traveled through Thailand and Vietnam and Hong Kong and Central America, and I've lived in the jungle and done all these interesting things and met all these interesting people, but I still didn't do what I know I have to do in my life. So that's sort of where I'm at now, and that's sort of what I'm working on now, is sort of being willing to let go of me and start fresh and go back to that time when everyone else was getting back to their lives and getting back to my life. And it occurred to me that all I have to do is like that guy, is make a decision to be happy and enjoyable, and enthusiastic, and just get to work. And that I don't have to talk myself into it, that I have to do it the same way that I've learned to do everything else around here, which was through spiritual help, through reaching out to you guys. I did everything that has gone well in my life has been a result of me letting go of something, of spiritually asking for something, of simply asking for something. And every time I get back to certain areas, these areas, I think that all of a sudden I'm supposed to do it. The last time I stopped drinking that way was the day before I went into that recovery home. I had made a decision. I'd just been married, and I'd made this decision that I was going to stop drinking and using. That was it. That was the last day. And I woke up feeling really good that morning. Like, all right, here I am. This is my day. This is where I changed my life. I changed my life. And I remember looking over at my bedpost over here in my bed table, and my friends used to call it Schwab's, the bed table. And I remember looking at Schwab's and then looking at the clock. And I remember like trying to pay attention to what time it was. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was waking up. And I remember thinking, remember this time, because this is the time you woke up when you stopped drinking and using. And then I saw the hand of the clock, and it was sort of going tick, 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 and it was going really slowly. And by about 45 seconds, I remember it occurred to me that maybe this wasn't a good day to begin this thing. I reached over and poured a glass of scotch and drank it down, and once again felt that feeling not of getting drunk anymore, but of taking care of the shakes, of taking care of the paranoia. And the next thing I remember, I found myself in this recovery house. And they were telling me stuff. They were telling me to, make my bed. I remember that was my first argument. I tried to explain to them that I was going to be getting in the bed that night and messing it up again. And they weren't interested in that. I continued to go to meetings there, but I had a really bad attitude. The only sort of two things that sort of clicked in, one was that thing with the riptides, and the other was I was standing outside the meeting that they would have every night in this recovery house, and I was like standing right next to we were allowed to walk up to the driveway, but not on the sidewalk, not beyond it. Otherwise, we were like AWOL or something. So I would always stand right by the line and do one of these things, you know, just to show them that they couldn't tell me what to do. And I saw a guy walking down the street, and he's like looking around at all these houses, and he's like really paranoid and just sweating, like really sweating and looking around, and he walked by me, and I said, "Excuse me, are you looking for the meeting?" And he jumped about 3 feet, and I remember thinking, freebaser. And I said, the meeting's in the back here, you know, if you want, I'll show you where it is. And he said, "Oh, okay." He says, how did you know? I told him he was the only one there that looked worse than me, you know, but he didn't care. We walked into the meeting, and I remember taking him over to where the coffee and cookies were, and telling him that the coffee was free, because how do you know, you know? And the cookies are free. So he took a cup of coffee, wasn't really interested in cookies, and showed him the literature and explained that the soft literature was free for the taking, but that they charged for the hard-covered literature, and but that it was only like $5, which is like a good deal for a whole book. And I said, and as a matter of fact, no one really seems to be in charge around here, so as far as I'm concerned, just take it. So he got a book, and then I told him he could sit with me back in the back row if he wanted. And I took him in the back row, and the meeting started, and he said his name, and that he was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I felt really good when he said that. You know, it was like I felt good. And they started reading stuff, and they read chapter 5, and they started telling the steps, going through the steps. And I remember, you know, hitting them on the side like that, saying, "Hey, listen up here. This is like the step thing. This is apparently very important." He was like, "Okay." And something very odd happened to me, which was I had always felt, since I'd been there, and even before when I used to just go to bars and sit in bars, but especially in the meetings, not having any chemicals to help me function, that I was in this little domed room, this glass, it was like a glass jar over me, and everything I would say would go through the jar, and everything you would say would be muffled and would come through the jar muffled, and I was completely isolated from the rest of you. And somewhere during this meeting where I was like nudging this guy, telling him to listen, I got the sensation of not being in that jar, being in like the big one with the rest of you in the meeting, you know? And this sense of connectedness I experienced for the first time, which was very unusual for me. I got the feeling that it was the first time I realized that you guys really were just like me. You looked a lot better. You looked a lot happier. Your lives were sort of going on. But I got that you had this big hurt inside in your gut, the same deep, dark secret that I had. It's just that you had learned to live with it and live in spite of it and to live well in spite of it. And I hadn't. It was still running my life, this hurt. I saw in your eyes this enthusiasm, and I didn't have that, but I wanted it. I continued to go to meetings for the next year. I worked the first 3 steps, sorta, kinda. And I remember experiencing something then, even. I remember having an argument with my wife at the time. And I was screaming at her, as I always did. And I was pointing my finger, telling her to shut up, and you don't know what you're talking about. And I was, you know, telling her what the truth was, and pointing my finger. And all of a sudden, and I said, "And you're absolutely right, and I'm sorry." And it was like I went, whoa. It was like I had never said that before. It had never occurred to me before, you know? I grew up in my father's house, And he was absolutely right all the time. And he was never sorry. And I had to be more right and less unsorry than him. And I accomplished that. But this thing happened to me, and that was really interesting. The other thing that happened to me was I stopped working the steps. And every 3 months or so, I would find a reason to find a resentment to get loaded. And one time I got loaded by drinking. One time I got loaded on morphine. One time I got loaded smoking pot. It didn't seem, there was no connection there other than I was pissed off. I was in pain. This thing inside me ruled me, and I needed to kill the pain. And when I would do the chemical or take the drink, it really would help. And I'd feel warm, and I'd feel relaxed, and I'd feel like another one. And another one, and another one. And then I'd get in trouble and I'd come back here and try it again. After being around here for a year, it occurred to me for the first time why they read chapter 5 at every meeting, because it used to annoy me. I always thought, what's the matter with chapter 8? You know? Not that I had read it. And the reason was so that one day I would actually listen to them reading chapter 5, and that one day I would actually hear them say that half measures availed us nothing. And I realized that's all I'd ever done around here, for half measures. And the result was nil until we let go absolutely. And I had always held on to certain things. I would get loaded if this happened, if that happened, if I didn't get what I wanted here. I heard them say, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And I wanted what you had. I wanted to be free. I wanted to be free. I wanted to be free to follow my own face. I wanted to be free to go wherever I wanted to go. I wanted to be free to learn, and I wanted to be comfortable in my own skin, more than anything. I began working the steps. At one point, I remember I hesitated a little bit, and around that time, I got the sponsors, Howard, and he told me the story. He said, Johnny, if you start coming to meetings and you start working the steps, but then you stop, he says you might all of a sudden find yourself at a meeting not liking somebody in the meeting. Someone will really piss you off, and you'll come back week after week, and they'll just piss you off more and more, and then eventually the whole meeting will piss you off. He says you'll come back, and eventually you'll say to yourself, not only does this meeting piss me off, but this program is filled with losers. And I'm going to make it my decision to stay sober no matter what. Don't drink, don't use no matter what, you know? That will be my anthem. But not go to meetings, not work the steps. And he says, and eventually you're going to find yourself walking into a bar, and you're going to sit down and you're going to say, Joe, give me a scotch. And he says, if Joe comes up to you and starts to pour you a drink and says to you, Johnny, I thought you were going to AA. Doesn't AA work? He said, be honest with the man and tell him you don't know whether it works or not because you never tried. And once again, I got something. I got it. That this thing was about doing these things in order to experience something. It wasn't about me making a decision to force my way through, to pull myself up by the bootstraps. I continued coming to meetings. I began to look around and see that there were two kinds of members around here. There were the players and the fans. And the players are the ones that set up the chairs and made the coffee and secretaried meetings and drove newcomers who were puking in their car to meetings and worked all 12 steps. And the fans were the ones that came and took the coffee and took a seat and could never figure out why this thing wasn't working for them and worked like the first 3 steps or worked the first step and the 12th step. And I remember thinking, I'm a fan, and I want to be a player. And I started to do all of this stuff. And I started to feel comfortable in my own skin. And as soon as I started feeling comfortable in my own skin, I remember thinking, now what do I need? You know, it was no longer enough. You know, my one dream, and I kept learning through through making mistakes and or watching other people make mistakes, that was sort of normal around here, and that all I had to do was to continue to be willing to grow spiritually. I found myself speaking at a meeting in the Crow Reservation in Montana a few years ago, and at the end of the weekend, my friend and I had gone up to spend a weekend with some kids. These guys who were running the thing said, "Look, Johnny, we'd like to take you on a sweat ceremony." And I went, "Great, sweat ceremony." I didn't know what a sweat ceremony was, but I'm enough of that junkie mentality where, if someone offers you something, you simply go, "Yeah, sure, yeah, no, I'll do that." And we get to this guy's house, and he's got this big bonfire going, and he's got these lava rocks in the middle of the bonfire. And we get there, and he's got this little domed room. And I'm looking at this domed room, and it's really small and short, and I'm thinking about it, and he says, "What we're going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to get some choke cherry bushes, and we're going to tie them together, and we're going to come back, we're going to put those lava rocks in the hole in the little domed room, we're going to get naked, and we're going to go in there and pour water on the rocks and beat ourselves with the choke cherry bushes." And I remember thinking that this didn't sound like such a good idea, after all. For one thing, I'm really claustrophobic. I'm really claustrophobic. I'm like one of those, if I don't get an aisle seat at the movies, I'm out of there. If I don't get an aisle seat on an airplane, I'm out of there, hopefully before it takes off. And I started to make jokes to try and get myself out of this situation, because I didn't want to say that I was afraid. And they wouldn't sort of let me out. And next thing I know, we got the choke cherry bushes together, and they're moving the rocks, and I'm getting more and more panicked, and they start getting undressed, and I'm going, okay, and I start taking off my clothes, and just when we're about to go into this little domed room, about 8 more guys show up in a truck. And when they start taking off their clothes, my heart starts to pound through my chest. And I'm thinking, there's no way that I'm going in. But the next thing I know, I'm going in, and I'm saying I'll sit right next to the door, and they're pushing me around to the center there, and everybody's getting in, and I'm really nervous. And then the guy starts the ceremony, and he starts by doing a little thing about where we bless the air, and everyone was supposed to take a deep breath and focus on the air, because you need air. And he picked up some dirt, and he said, "We'll all bless the earth, because you need that to grow food." And then he took a drink of water and passed it around, and everyone blessed the water. And I started to feel a little better. It was like getting into the moment kind of thing. And just when I started to feel a little better, he said, "And now we're going to be grateful for the pain and discomfort we're about to experience." And I remember going, I want to get it. And just when I was ready to get the fuck out of there, they closed the flap, which I didn't know existed, on the door, poured all this water on these lava rocks, and I've been in steam rooms before, but this was hot. This was like flesh burn off bones hot kind of thing. And I start to hyperventilate immediately, and it's pitch dark, can't see anything. All I know is that it is so hot, and when people beat themselves with branches in heat, what it does is it pushes all the hot air to the idiot that's not doing it. So I'm getting fried there. I can't breathe, there's no oxygen. Heat takes away all the oxygen, and I'm trying to grasp, my heart is just pounding and pounding, and finally I just wanted to crawl out of my skin, and I heard the guy say, everyone's chanting too. They're hey, 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 and it's making me crazy. It's just making me nuts. And finally, this guy says, if you can't breathe, lie down on your stomach, and the bottom 2 inches there's more air. And I'm thinking, I'm in this little room with all these naked strangers and beating themselves, and I'm lying on my stomach naked, and so I did it, and And I'm trying to breathe, and I'm trying to suck in air, and all of a sudden, I just hit this wall. It was like, boom. It was a fucking wall. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to implode. And that it occurred to me that I had two other decisions that I could make other than implode, then jump up and just try and burst through the walls. And that was, I could make a decision to turn my life and my will over to the care of God, as I understood God, and I could make a decision to trust in these strangers, that these guys were not here to harm me, but they were here to take me on some journey and to teach me something about myself that I didn't know. And I remember making those decisions. And I remember hearing everyone's chants grow louder and louder, and I started to chant myself, because all of a sudden I thought about this and you guys and what I'd learned. And I started to chant the serenity prayer, and I started to say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And all of a sudden, some of the other guys in the tent started to chant with me. And all of a sudden, we were all chanting the serenity prayer together. And all of a sudden, I found myself sitting up in this tent and realizing that it wasn't as hot as I thought it was. And there was more oxygen there than I had recalled. And I started to breathe. And I started to sit up straight. And I started to beat myself with the chokecherry bushes. Because it was supposed to be something healing. And that I could get behind something healing. Because I needed some healing in my heart. And the next thing I knew, the flap flew up. And all this cool air just came whizzing in. And a bunch of the other guys who had been having anxiety attacks went tearing out of this place. They just went tearing out. And I remember I stayed. And I stayed, and a couple of the other guys stayed, and they sort of looked at me and sort of looked at each other and sort of smiled at each other, that smile that we sort of give each other when we see someone who's new, someone who's feeling lost around here, who's a little awkward around here, who's terrified, who would just love for nothing more in their life than to be comfortable in their own skin. And they sort of gave the nod. And I remember thinking about all of you, and thinking that when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was going to implode, and I was going to die. I'd spent 12 years addicted to alcohol, cocaine, pot, Placidil, locker room, Percodan, morphine, anything I could get my hands on. I was flexible. I'd OD'd about 6 times the month before I came here. My wife would wake up in the middle of the night because she would hear me not breathing and turning blue, and she would jump on my chest to try and get my heart started. I attempted suicide twice. Once I took 45 Nembutal and was in a coma for 4 days because I knew life was not going to get any better. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to make a decision to trust in God and to trust that you guys were a bunch of strangers who weren't here to harm me. And you were simply here to take me on a journey and teach me something I needed to learn. And I needed to continue to grow and to keep coming back here and to learn things and to give them away. And it just occurs to me now that maybe feeling good in my own skin is enough. And the other things are simply things that I have to learn about and be willing to let go and embrace, like I've done a lot of times, like hopefully I'll continue to do a lot of times, like hopefully I'll continue to do with the rest of you a lot of times. So thank you very much. I love you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.